It's just a minute after 1 o'clock. We've got a good group here, so I'm happy to get started, and then I'll continue to let folks in as they roll in. So it's great to see everybody. Welcome all to the May ILL Roundtable. Really appreciate everybody taking the time out of your day to come and get together and chat a bit about resource sharing. I know that we often do introductions, and I don't want to skip over any of the fun, but we have a pretty stacked agenda today, and I think I might skip over the introductions because we're all going to get together soon at VLA for the ILL roundtable get together that Scott's hosting. So stay tuned for more information about that. I have some info that I'll share at the end of the meeting. So I figured we'll all see each other then. So maybe we can just roll into the agenda for today. Right now, I'm screen sharing just a slide that you should all be able to see. I'm going to close that in just a moment, and I'll begin to screen share the agenda, and then we can just take a look at that together. All right, so just bear with me one moment while I close PowerPoint and switch on over to my PDF. Alrighty, and I'm just going to share a PDF window here, and this will show all of the agenda items for today. All right, great. So I've got the agenda screen shared. As always, with the roundtable, if questions come up, don't feel like you have to wait until the end. Please feel free to raise your hand, unmute yourself, type a comment in the chat, and I will do my best to keep up with checking in on those throughout the meeting and while I'm going through the agenda items. Well, just letting a couple folks into the meeting. All right, great. I think I've got everybody. Great. Oh, and just a heads up, I forgot to mention at the beginning, this meeting is being recorded. So at the end of the meeting, we'll edit it down, and my goal is to have this recording up on the ILL webpage within a week or so. And if you have any questions about like the recording or where to find that or anything, just let me know. I'm always happy to help. Cool. So the first item I have on the agenda here, and I'm just going to zoom in a bit to make this a little bit easier for folks to read. Is the annual review and updates to the Interlibrary Loan Best Practices document. And so my understanding is that each year, the ILL Roundtable gets together, we review the document, we discuss some potential changes. Last year, we read through the document and I had drafted some changes, and then we reviewed them again at the August meeting, and then they went live in August. I'm open to doing it that way again, or we can switch it up. But I thought I would open the best practices document, which I'll do in just a moment. And then I have 2 agenda items in reference to the best practices document that were submitted for like potential conversation topics, things to discuss that if, depending on how things shake out and what the group is feeling, they could potentially be incorporated into the best practices document in some way. So I think that for now, I'll stop sharing this window. I'm going to switch over to the best practices document so that we can just all take a look at where it stands and how it reads today. So just bear with me one moment. I'm going to open up a different window. For a moment, you'll see Clover here. I'm just going to pop over a tab. Here's the ILL best practices. I'm just going to zoom in a bit to make that as readable as possible. So previously we used to have this on, I think it was a Google Doc or a PDF or something like that. I recently changed it over to a web page, and thanks Marie for putting that link in the chat. It's also clickable from the agenda in LibCal too, in case you're working off of that PDF. So yeah, here's the ILL best practices. I send them out on the listserv every 6 months. I think I did so in the winter. I'll look back and see, but I figured I'll send out the updated best practices after we approve them, whether that happens in today's meeting or later on in August. Just one moment. I usually have this preset so that when folks join, they're auto muted. But if your computer happens to not be muted, if you wouldn't mind muting for now, that'd be great. Thanks a bunch. So I'm just going to quickly, or not quickly, but breeze through some of the ones that are super familiar to us, and then we can move on to the potential edits or things to discuss. And as always, if questions come up about particular points as I'm running through this list, don't feel like you have to wait for the end. Feel free to do the raise hand or add something into the chat. So to get started, we have don't request items if you don't lend them, new items, AV, DVDs, etc. And we had a conversation about that last year at I think it was the in-person meeting in August, where that's definitely a case-by-case basis. We can chat more about that too. Then up next, we have make sure to check Clover at least twice a week, check all statuses to make sure requests are up to date, make sure contact information is included in your participant record, especially an email address, set the days to respond to match the number of days requests are processed so that all requests do not sit with you for several weeks. And there's a screenshot here of the Clover participant record that shows you just what that looks like, so you can set that up. If you share a catalog with a library, don't use that library's catalog to create an ILL record in your library when checking it out to a patron. If paperwork, sleeves, book straps are included when an item is received, make sure they're included when an item is returned. If you've added your own bands or book straps, please remove before returning the item. Do not add labels to books belonging to other libraries. If you must apply a sticker or adhesive to an ILL item, remove them before returning it to the lending library. Suggested information to include when lending an item is the due date, the request number, borrowing library, or a checkout slip if your ILS prints out this information. Making sure that Clover and ILS due dates match if possible. Review due dates in Clover requests before applying a status of will supply in Clover. Checking the borrower's notes to see if a specific due date's being requested. The suggested loan period is at least 45 days, but this is up to individual libraries. Do not request a new title until it has been published for 60 days to allow time for processing and local use. Double check that you are sending the item to the correct library. Check the courier and shipping label. Include a return label when sending out an item, both courier and USPS. Review the borrower and lender notes and all Clover requests. A blue flag icon in the Clover Request Manager will appear next to requests that contain notes. And if something is received that was meant for another library, please forward to the correct library indicated on the paperwork. If paperwork is included, also reach out to me, Carolyn Mark, and there's my email address. So I saw a question in the chat, and I just wanted to make a note for myself that I believe with the latest update, the indicator for a note has changed. It's no longer a blue flag icon. I think it's like a little text box. I'm not quite sure what Autographics calls it. So one potential update that we might consider is just changing that language to note the different type of icon. I did see a comment in the chat. Niket asks, does the return by date set for 45 days show as a default due date, and can this be adjusted? I tried to extend this for a longer default due date, and it doesn't seem to update as expected. I'll take a look, Niket, at your library's participant record and follow up with you. If other folks happen to know the answer to that, please feel free to chime in the chat or unmute, but I'm not quite positive offhand. A Westford Public Library. Great, thank you. Excellent. Just making a quick note. Great, yeah, Niket, thank you for that question. I'm not quite sure offhand, and I'll take a look after our meeting, and I'll follow up with you. Oh, Robin follows up with a comment and writes, I think I've been able to adjust the default due date beyond the 45 days. Yeah, it might be in the settings. I'm not sure if that's in the participant record or elsewhere. So I'd be happy to take a look. And oh, Robin, you have your hand raised. Did you have a question?
Yeah, I did. Like maybe not a question so much as a comment. Like one of the things in the best practices is
Mhm.
to return when you return a book to take off any book straps that you've put on. Personally, I love when they come back with book straps because it has all the information I might need and frequently a barcode. So it's not like I can't recycle paper. I'm wondering why that's in there. Like, and let me be clear, if they stick something to the book, like
Mhm.
so there's glue in, any sort of sticky or whatever, then I want that taken off because I want to make sure that it's cleared. But if we're just talking about a book strap or something slipped in the front cover of a book or whatever, I like getting them back with that on it, in it.
Thanks for the comment. Yeah, and I'm just going to check in on the chat here. Marie writes, sometimes the paperwork has the patron name on it. So yeah, I was thinking back to some of the reasons when we had this conversation. I think it came to adhesives and patron privacy. So I think that if you have paperwork with no patron information, no identifying information, and no adhesive, that would be fair. But for best practices as like a blanket, where I know we're trying to avoid sharing anything that would have like patron identifying information and also trying to avoid the stickers. So I'm not sure if I have a perfect answer for that, but I do appreciate the sentiment and like reusing paper and whatnot, especially because like a book strap makes for great scrap paper. Yeah, that's definitely something to keep thinking about. And Ree follows up in the chat, but please return with the lending library's paperwork. Yes, for sure. And I just want to make sure that we have that. Yep. I'm just going to highlight this here and just read through this. If paperwork, sleeves, book straps are included when the item is received, make sure they're included when it is returned. Um, yes, please. And Logan adds a comment and writes, I don't like getting books with U straps on it. So yeah, this seems like a matter of preference and something that I haven't thought about before. So I appreciate the thoughts and feedback. So I'm gonna pause on sharing the best practices document that we have here and pop back over to the agenda because that has a couple of topics that were submitted about the best practices. So I'm screen sharing this again. And I'm just going to check in on the chat because we've got a comment. Thanks everybody for all of your contributions in the chat. Logan follows up about the book straps and writes, it creates more work for me and is confusing because some lending libraries put straps on that need to stay on. Yeah, I see. That makes a lot of sense. Yeah, thanks, Logan. So Wendy from Bent Northrop submitted an item the agenda for the best practices document surrounding due dates. And I know that oftentimes, and this is just me speaking as Carolyn, not speaking for Wendy, when libraries want a specific due date, you might include something in um, the borrower's note or somewhere else in the request to note that. And so Wendy writes, when we request a later due date and the lending library sends it with an earlier date, we assume they wouldn't have sent the book if they weren't willing to accept our request. So I thought maybe we could discuss the topic of cases where a user at a requesting library requests a later due date, but the lending library provides an earlier due date when the request is marked will supplier shipped. I was just curious to see if anybody had any thoughts on that. I think that in the Vermont ILL code or the best practices, there's the point of if you request a renewal and you don't hear back, with good faith, you can presume that the renewal would be granted. Here's a comment from Logan. Logan writes, when I don't get the later due date, I assume the lender just made a mistake and request a renewal when necessary. I think that's fair. Do other folks do the same as Logan, or is there another workflow that you use? Like if you're looking for a due date that's like longer than the 45-day default, maybe a couple of months, do you put something in the lender's note? Do you go for the default and then request a renewal later?
Um, I put it in the lender's notes, and this is frequently an issue with book club books. So half of them will come in with the correct due date, and half of them will come in without it, with the incorrect due date. The first thing I do is I first lend out the ones with the correct due date. And the problem is sometimes if you request a renewal like ahead of time, because I don't want to give it to a patron if then they're going to say, no, no, we meant that due date. Um, but if you request a renewal right away, sometimes you end up with an even earlier due date because it defaults to like 3 days, whatever the default is from when it's first requested. So sometimes I hold on to them for a while and see if I need those.
Thanks, Robin. Yeah, that
Yeah.
makes a lot of sense, especially with those book club books. That's an interesting case there. And Meg, you have your hand raised as well.
Yeah, hi. For
Hey,
some
Meg.
reason, I can never like type into the chat on my iPad, like, and then I'm reminded I should look into this in between meetings. So anyway, sorry to have to
That's all
like
good.
talk talk
Thank you
this
for making it
out.
work.
Um, but I completely agree. I think I see it a lot with book groups, and honestly, I think this is like the number one most annoying thing about doing interlibrary loan. If I'm being totally honest, is putting notes related to due dates and just feeling like things are coming me with due dates that are like wildly sooner than are necessary. And I feel like it's like I truly don't mind if someone rejects it because they can't fulfill it for that time, but it just feels like it's a case of notes not getting acknowledged and just things getting sent out at this default. um and it makes it hard because even, I mean, it's silly, like I'll go in and I'll do all the renewals as things come overdue, but then it just ends up being more busy work. Or like whoever was just saying, it ends up you're tracking a lot of these due dates when the whole point of putting the note in at the beginning is being very forthright about how long you need it for and just trying to adhere to that. So that's kind of my 2 cents. I would love if we were more aligned on the due dates. I think we all have so much stuff going on that it would be like one less thing for anyone to really worry about. And it is in there in the doc too, because I think the other thing that sometimes gets misaligned is the ILS checkout and the Clover checkout also. And I'm getting emails saying things are overdue, but in Clover they're not actually overdue, or on a paper printout it's going to say one thing, um, which can be tricky. So yeah, that's just my 2 cents. I know we're all balancing a lot of stuff, but I think it would make everyone's life easier if we can really try to nail that down.
Thank you, Meg. I really appreciate that. Um, I'll I was just taking some notes while you were chatting, and I'm wondering somewhat out loud here. I think I might reach out to Autographics and see if there might be some sort of way they can make it a requirement that you have to acknowledge a note before responding to the request. Like you have to check a box next to the note before marking will supply or will not supply. Um, and if folks have other suggestions, I'm really open to, but that when you were just going through that, I was thinking about like, is there something that I could do? Because I'm not quite sure if I have the capacity in my position to let folks know like how to set due dates at their library like, so that everybody would be on the same page. But I think something that I can do is require a note acknowledgement. And so I'll check in with the folks at Autographics to see if that's something that they might be able to do. My fingers are crossed that there's something that we could make happen. With that recent update, they did change some of the ways notes are displayed. So I think that they're getting some feedback from other consortia about this too. So this is something I'll definitely look into. And Murray, you have a hand raised?
Yeah, I was actually thinking about the note acknowledgement would be fabulous because even like last week, I got a request for a book that came out last Tuesday. And in the denial, I put in the note why I was denying it. And then today I got a request for the same book from the same library. So if if the note had been read, they would maybe know not to try again.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, that's totally frustrating. Yeah, thank you for sharing your experience, Murray. Um, I think that the note acknowledgement could really help this. And I'm going to check in with Autographics about that. Yeah, I like this idea. I'm feeling excited about it. I'm just going to catch up on the chat here. Thanks everybody for adding comments. Robin writes, having to acknowledge the note is a great idea. Marie, yes, acknowledge the note, please. And Robin follows up, if they acknowledge the note, can we assume the extended due date is being granted? So what do folks think about that? I mean, if we have a note in there that says book club requesting a due date of, like, I don't know how long book clubs often lend for, like August or way beyond the 45-day period, as long as the note is acknowledged, would folks then think it's appropriate to assume that the extended due date is granted? My initial thought is yes. Would the acknowledgement be something that we see on our end? That would be my hope, would be that there would be, it would be visible on both sides. So like the way, and I'm not sure what Autographics might be able to do, but I'm envisioning something where the person who is reviewing the request would have to check a box saying that they acknowledge the note. And then in Clover, when you're looking at an ILL request at the end, there's the request history. So maybe there could be something there that would say like lender note acknowledged and a date, or even like I know that when you look at the history information, it even shows you the user. So that could be really helpful. So when I was kind of brainstorming this as we've been talking, that's what I was thinking about, something that people would see on both sides of the request. But if others have like thoughts or ideas, I'm super open to that too. Oh, and Meg, you have your hand raised? Sorry.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I guess this is also assuming that everyone knows how to manually change the due date for a specific item. Because I think that's like, I love the idea of being able to acknowledge a note and all of that, but I also feel like it is the mechanism in place where we can acknowledge the note and then physically have that due date be reflective of that within the record. So I don't think it necessarily has to be like, oh, they acknowledge the note, so I'm assuming the due date is that. Like, there is a way that they can acknowledge the note and change the due date so that it's gonna match and come through. So but I don't know, maybe not everyone realizes that there is a way that you can change that on an individual record
That's true.
or individual
Yeah.
request.
No, thank you for raising that point, Meg. Yeah, lots to think about here. I think I'll reach out to Autographics and see if this might even be a potential. And then when we get back together for our August meeting, I should have some information by then, like whether it's something that they think they can do or not, and a potential timeline. And once I have a sense of like how note acknowledgement might work, maybe we can chat about adding this into the best practices in some way, or perhaps not. Niket added a comment as well here. I'm just going to read through. I now see that in the participant record, I need to click on lending policy to increase the loan period by type of item. Oh, Niket, thanks so much for looking into that. I appreciate it. And for others, that's really helpful information too. I'll make a note and I'll make sure that I include that in the meeting summary. Yeah, so definitely lots to think about here. And I really appreciate like all the points that folks have raised and like frustration shared and other comments about how we can sort of make some of this better workflow and remove some of the frustrations. For the new book requests, for any libraries that have the capacity with their ILS, we can map locations via Z3950 and limit locations. So if you have like a location or an item type of new book in your ILS and you're finding that you're still receiving requests for new books or any type of item, just as an aside, that is something that we can adjust, we as in like the state library from the admin account in Clover. So if you're receiving requests for things that you think you shouldn't be receiving requests for, that you don't want to be receiving requests for, let me know. And depending on what system you're using, that's something that we can configure for you. Cool. So I'm just looking over my notes here. Yeah, I think I'll reach out to Autographics about this. I'll reach out to them this week and hopefully I'll have an update for all of you soon about note acknowledgement and due dates, and I'll talk to their team and see if they have other ideas for how we might be able to make this work. Marie, oh, it's a good question. Would there be a way to limit by the date accession field? With Z3950, we're limited by targets. So I think that they read off of they might be able to. I'm gonna check in with autographics. I think that would be in the same field without having a MARC record in front of me. What field was that? Date accession. Yeah, I think that would be coming from the record. Yeah, so for example, I'm forgetting which field is. It's like the 852 or the 952. There'll be a couple of fields and it'll have like the item type, the location, there'll be the date that it was accessioned. And so I'm thinking about that date accessioned, and I think it's in that same MARC field. So I'll check in with autographics and I'll just make a note. That's for Warrant Public. See if that's something they can do. It's a great question. Oh, Tracy, yeah, go ahead.
Hi. I wanted to say something from the perspective also of a requesting library. If more libraries did, contact you, either use new item types or have things screened out by location, that would help a lot when we are requesting books and say we need something for our book group, and say it's even ahead of time, the book group is asking which books, if we might be able to get this book or that book through Interlibrary Loan, and we look at it in Clover, it looks like there's so many copies available. When then you go to request them and you get all these will not supplies because all these books that appear to be available for loan, in fact, were not available for loan. So anybody who's not already doing it, who has the time, to set that up with Carolyn, it will help you from, not having, you wouldn't have to reject all these requests, but also it helps the requesting libraries as well. Thanks.
Thanks, Tracy. I appreciate you sharing that with everybody. And yeah, if folks are interested and like you're not sure if your library has settings mapped, or you'd like a copy of how your library is currently set up, or if you have any questions about that, please feel free to reach out to me. I've been working on a project since our last ILL roundtable meeting where we talked about the locations displaying as parentheses. And I've been doing a lot of cleanup and remapping and doing sort of a deep dive into that. So I feel like I've learned a lot from doing that cleanup project, and I feel like I'm at a good spot to help libraries with that too now. Over the last couple of months, I've really been trying to clean up all of those parentheses records. So thank you all to folks, as an aside, who have sent those to me, because that's been great. And yeah, as Tracy said, if you have items that you'd like to map, it does make things move a lot more seamlessly through Clover. I'm going to check in on the chat here. Ruth writes, some of this, Ruth from New Haven, right? Some of this is about learning how to do things for sure. I've been getting responses in the lender notes for not filled or retry items lately that I don't really understand. And Logan writes, thank you, Care, for doing that. You're welcome. And Ruth, thank you for your comment. Yeah, so you'll get, and if you have questions specifically about requests, please feel free to reach out to me over email anytime if you get a response. If it's from the Department of Libraries, please feel free to reach out to me, or if it's from a different library, if you'd like to reach out to me, I can help the best I can, or I would recommend contacting the library directly. But for example, if there's an item that you're requesting, it comes through the VSS inbox, someone from the department staff will put a note in, such as like, there's copies available in state, you could request in state, let us know if you have questions, or there's no copies available in state, we can route from out of state. So there's sort of a variety of notes that you might find that will help inform you of like why your request was denied, where you might be able to find it. Is it a dead end? Are there other steps, other options? And so if specific questions come up or if you get a response in the lender's note that doesn't make sense to you, feel free to reach out. And as we move through the agenda, I'm going to talk a bit about will not supply, unfilled, retry, and try to clear up a little bit of the muck and gray areas surrounding that because it can be a bit confusing. But as always, if you get a request and you're not sure what's going on, let us know. And so, yes, she writes VSS notes. It's usually saying request from a different library, but I don't think I'm really requesting specifically from a library. I'm just trying for any copy. Yeah, thank you for following up, Ruth. Yeah, so when you are in Clover, and you're looking at the search results, you'll see like copies from Vocal all under one record, or copies from Catamount all under one record, or maybe an individual copy for like a school library or a library that's not part of a consortia. So when you click on request this item from a specific record, in theory, depending on how your lender list is configured, that is the library or set of libraries that the request will be routed to. So if you're trying for any copy, I would suggest requesting on a record with a lot of available copies. And if you're looking for a specific title, or if there's a specific request that has come up that's been troublesome, please feel free to email me. But just to speak generally in a way that would be helpful for anyone, that's sort of what I would say in support of that. And we had another best practices topic that for discussion that was submitted by Robin at Grand Isle. And I'm just going to read through what was submitted here, and then we can chat about it. So I'd like to have a discussion at the next ILO roundtable about best practices for books that are really popular. My collection seems to always have one or two titles that are requested immediately in Clover when they're checked back in. As a small rural library whose patrons don't place many books on hold, it means books like The Correspondent and Last Year James are not on the shelves for my patrons to check out. I know I can check will not provide to keep it on the shelves here, but I often see a long list of libraries before me and I feel bad. Also, if I did that based on the last few times really popular books are checked back in, it would have been requested again within a few hours. I would love a discussion around this topic. And then in parentheses, for now, I think I'm going to change The Correspondent back to new book when it returns. So I was just, looks like it just paused screen sharing. Let me get that back up. Sorry, y'all. I was curious to see if folks had thoughts on that comment from Robin. We were chatting about this a little bit, going over the last bullet point. And so I think a couple of suggestions that I thought I would share are, yes, if you have the ability to change it to new book in your catalog, please do so. And if you'd like to check in with me and make sure that you have your library mapped for non-lending, I'm happy to do that too. Oh, and then Robin writes, FYI, I changed it back to new book and somehow it got requested again. Oh, that's odd. Huh. I'll take a look at the Z39 settings for your library, Robin, and take a look. Yeah. Yeah, my understanding is that if it's cataloged as new book and in the new book like item type, then that should block it from being requested. So I'll take a look at your account, see what I can find. And I feel like so many people are requesting The Correspondent that I wouldn't be surprised if it's like breaking the barriers of Clover in some way. I feel like that's been like a super popular book lately. So yeah, I was curious if anyone has comments on this. Like what do you do when you receive a request for a popular title? Do you usually respond with just like a lender's note saying too new? Do you have all of your new books classified as new books so that they're not lending? What works best for you? Thanks everybody from your comments. Oh, Robin writes the shelf location and item type for that book do not currently match. And Murray writes, I sigh heavily. And Rutland writes, would high demand keep it from being requested from ILL? Quick follow-up, what do you mean by high demand? Like a setting or just like demand from patrons?
I was talking about the setting, like
Oh,
new book as its item type. There's also
Mhm.
high demand. I'm not sure if that is an item type or not, but if it was designated as that, would that keep it from going out through ILL?
I believe so. Yeah, my understanding is that if the item type is new book, then it wouldn't go out for ILL as
Wouldn't
long
be
as the
available.
Z39 mapping is aligned with that. And Ruth follows up and writes, I just declined the request if I think needed for some reason. Oh, sorry, 1 second.
The electrical panels are in the, yep.
Just 1 moment. Sorry, y'all. Okay. So I'm gonna stop screen sharing this for just 1 moment because I don't want to tell you guys the wrong thing here. And I'm just gonna check really quickly. Just 1 moment, and then I'll screen share and show you what I'm seeing. All right. And I'm gonna screen share now. So this is just to show you what's in like the under, I don't know if I, okay. So here's like this is for the Vocal Consortium. So this just to show you like the behind the scenes, these are the Z39 database definitions. So depending on what type of ILS you have, there's different capabilities and we can map. So for example, this is Grand Isle. So I was just checking out new book, and it does look like if you have it cataloged as NEWBK, that would be non-lending. And then here on the right, just to show you, if the code G761 was here on the right, that would make it available for lending. So from what I'm seeing here, that item type would be marked as non-lending. And so just to give folks a sense of what that looks like. And if you're interested in setting that up with us, if you're in Vocal or Catamount, we have like really handy spreadsheets if you'd like to like update your settings or take a look. And for smaller not smaller libraries, individual libraries or libraries not in a consortium on different types of ILSs, I'll often reach out to Autographics and see what the mapping capabilities might be. So just wanted to kind of show you all what that looks like.
So I'm confused by what you just showed because
Yeah.
everything in my catalog, all of my barcodes start with G761. And you said if it's marked as G761, it can be lent.
Oh, let me reshare and I'd be happy to clarify. Thank you for your question.
And can you make
So-
that bigger? Because old eyes.
Sure, thank you for asking. I'd be happy to.
Thank you.
Yes. So if G761 is in this right-hand column here under ILL code, it would be marked as lending in Clover. So you'll see here for Grand Isle, DVDs are available for lending, but ebooks are not. And because that code is not on the right, it prevents it from lending. So going down here to new book, you'll see the same. Non-lending, no code on the right.
Okay.
Yeah. And so if other libraries would like to see like theirs. I probably won't pull up other examples now, but I'd be happy to send you. I might be able to make like a PDF of this or send screenshots or make it into a spreadsheet, or I could check in with Autographics and see what the options might be. And so yeah, configuring these settings is a great way to prevent your library from receiving requests for materials that you don't want. And if you think that your settings are configured correctly, but you're still receiving requests, let me know. And Robin, if you notice anything amiss, moving forward, I'd be happy to put in a support ticket with Autographics and ask for their support in troubleshooting too. Because beyond once you kind of come out of it not working from this admin, that's usually when I call Autographics in for backup. So I'm going to stop sharing this and head back to the agenda PDF and check on the chat. Ruth writes, I just declined the request if I think it's needed for some reason. Hopefully that is okay. Yeah, that's totally okay. And we'll talk more about that later. Oh, high demand is a catamount item type. Interesting. Just 1 second. Sorry, I'm gonna go back and check and see if I have that mapped for catamount at all. Yeah, I see it. Yep. So for example, the first one that came up was Norman Williams, and high demand is mapped as non-lending. Thank you. I didn't know that was I haven't had to update that for catamount. I'm just gonna make a quick note. I learned something new today. That's awesome. Thank you. And Ruth, I'll take a closer look at your settings. Thank you for the comment. I know we had taken a look at that before. I'll check in with Autographics if needed. I'm just following up on some of the comments here. Ruth writes, excuse me, Marie from Warren writes, like Ruth, I decline the request if it is a hot book that just happens to be sitting on our shelf for a day or two, but I suspect it will get snapped up shortly. Highly scientific. Hey, I think that's a great method. And Jennifer writes, for books older than 60 days but less than 6 months, our director at Pete, I'm sorry, I always mispronounce that, Memorial Library in Wilmington has asked we give a 4-week rather than a standard ILL 6-week 45 days checkout period. Hey, that works, and thank you for sharing that. That reminds me that
Thank
at the
you. It is.
Mhm.
All I was going to say is it is petty.
Hetty, thank you. Okay, I appreciate it. I don't know why I want to take like those 2 E's and like stretch them out. It's petty. Perfect. Thank you. And at the August roundtable, I think that we discussed there's some libraries in the state that do lend new books, and I put a list of all of those libraries in the meeting summary. So if you would like that list, or if you don't see it on the website, let me know. And we have another comment from Maria Warren. She writes, I also do that for newer books, shorter lending period, and usually no renewal. And I usually indicate that in the notes field if they read the notes field. Thank you. And thank you everybody who does read the notes field, who enters the notes, even though sometimes it feels like it's going into a void. I really appreciate the conversation. I'm hopeful that I can get some steps made towards note acknowledgement. Oh, and Wendy writes, I use retry more often than will not supply. Will lend a new book, but not something that is in high demand. Interesting. I've learned something here about the differences between like the new book and the high demand, and I'll take a closer look at those settings. So thanks everybody for helping me learn too. Oops, I think I just paused sharing. There we go. So I think for the purposes of like today's meeting and the agenda, I think I won't propose any updates to the best practices at this time. I think that the first point here that was raised will involve like the autographic support ticket, and then the second conversation that we've had about best practices for popular titles, I think I'd like to think a little bit more about that between now and August, if that works for everybody. And then I'll also work on some language to change that one point that we looked at where they talked about the notes icon being like a blue flag, because that's changed. So just gonna make a quick note. So if that sounds okay to everybody, I think I might move on through the agenda, and then we can plan to revisit the best practices document in August, maybe go over a couple of the potential edits, and then maybe approve them then, if that works for all. Oh, I think I missed a comment in the chat. Oh, Wendy follows up and writes, if they get around the list and comes back around, if they get, excuse me, I'm gonna rewind. If they get through the list and comes back around, then will we consider? Yeah, thank you, Wendy, and stay tuned. We'll talk about some of the options for responding to requests here in a couple minutes. Okay, so this is the next section of the agenda is ILL listserv, submitted agenda items. So these are things that we've been chatting about on the listserv or that have been emailed to me, like specific requests to discuss. So I'll try to go through this on the quicker side. So anytime Autographics puts together an update release, I send that out on the ILL listserv. I try to send it out pretty soon after I get it because they don't always give us the most notice, but we do try. So this is the March 5th meeting notes, excuse me, not meeting notes, release notes. I'm going to try to make this bigger here. Oh, I can still read that. So the March 5th update involved some changes to the notes. And so I just wanted to show folks this document here. This is available on the LibCal event page as well for today's meeting. And these were also sent out on the listserv. So I can follow up with folks if they'd like a copy of this, or if you're having trouble finding it, I'd be happy to help. So you might see now that when you log into your request manager, and we'll get into the other request manager changes in a second, but that the notes have changed in terms of the little icons that display to the left of your titles and other information in the request queue. So previously there were little icons. The most one that I would see the most often was the little red flag noting an expiring request. But they've added a couple of new things, and I just wanted to share this here so that people know what these icons mean. So if you see this icon here with like a text box, 3 lines, sort of like a notification icon, this lets you know it's an unreviewed note. And so if you're looking at a request in Clover and you haven't looked at the note yet, you haven't reviewed it, this type of icon will display. This is the reviewed note icon. So an empty box that displays next to the request lets you know that you have reviewed the note. And their idea of reviewing the note, I believe, is like reading through it. If others have experienced this on the other side, because I'm often putting the notes in and not responding to them, if anyone has reviewed a note in a way that you did have to select something, please let me know in the chat, because I don't want to misspeak. But my understanding is that going down to the notes section and reading through it will change the icon. So if you're going through your pending requests and you see this top icon with the lines and the dot, that's a brand new note. And I think either way, before you move forward with the request, it's always good to double check the notes, even if you have reviewed it before. But I just wanted to spend a minute there to explain what that is. The release notes go into more detail about the notes and how this works in the status list. But just to show you an example down here of what it looks like in your queue, there's the notes column. Oops. On the left there. And in this example, this first title is a brand new unreviewed note, and that second one is unreviewed. And so for borrowing library staff, these note icons are new for the borrowing libraries. And for lending library staff, this is replacing that blue push pin button. So when we think about updating the best practices, I think I'll draft some language reflecting that change, because the best practices, I think, talk about the blue pin. There's also a cool way that you can filter borrower requests, at least I think it's cool, to include those that have notes or only unreviewed notes. And so if you're in your request queue and you go up to that upper corner, you can filter the requests just to show ones that have notes and just to show the notes that you haven't seen, which is pretty nifty. Oh, and here we go. They do have the note acknowledgement. Interesting. I feel like I haven't seen this yet. Huh. Has anybody else? Just gonna check on the chat. Yeah, I'm just reading through this here. Yeah, Meg writes, I haven't. I haven't seen this either. I'm gonna check in with Autographics about this and see why not, because that's exactly what we were just talking about. Oh, and here's another comment saying that you have been using it. Interesting. Okay. So this is what changes the icon from reviewed to not reviewed, is by clicking on this acknowledge note. I think I sort of glazed over that the first time. I must have. Interesting. So we've got one report of a library here who is getting them and some not. And Marie writes that they haven't seen it. Okay.
Marie here, and I just went into it, and if you click on, you have notes to review, click on, there's a link, review notes, then you get a pop-up that shows you the notes, and that's where acknowledge notes button is.
Thank you, Marie.
So if you just scroll down to read the notes, you don't get it.
That's a trip. Okay. Thank you, Marie. I really appreciate that. I'm going to include information about this in the meeting summary. And going back to our previous conversation, I will still reach out to Autographics and see if that's something that we can make a requirement, so that if there is a note, you have to acknowledge the note as like a required field before responding, will supply or whatever it might be. Okay, cool. I'm glad we talked about that. It's been a little bit, like since I looked at those release notes from March 5th, and I had not seen that to click on in Clover. So thank you all. Yeah, I'm excited to check that out now. And Niket writes, maybe an alert pop up that you can't submit unless you acknowledge the notes. Sounds like that is what you're saying, Carolyn. Yes, that's right. Exactly. Yeah, something like an error message, or a you must respond to the note or must acknowledge the note before moving forward with the request, some sort of like prompt that would be generated by Autographics. Yeah, cool. We can figure something out. Yep. And Wendy shares a screenshot here. There's the unreviewed notes. Interesting. The system is showing a lot of unacknowledged notes from before. That's odd. I'm not quite sure why that would be. Be happy to take a look. Oh, and completed. Yeah, I see that now. I couldn't see that number before. It's like over 200. Oh, tens and rates. Can you please send me this page? I'm going to see if it will, I can't put documents in the Teams chat here, but what I can do is send a link to LibCal here, and I will screen share and show you where they are. So here's a link for today's ILL roundtable, and I'm gonna share that window. Here's the ILL roundtable meeting for today. I'm just gonna zoom in a bit. And you can see down here, there's a couple of attachments. So this is today's agenda, the document that we just looked at, the share it release notes, and a document that we'll look at in just a moment with the March 31st share it release notes. So I'm sorry I can't put them in the chat, but I'm happy to email them to you after the meeting too. Cool. And let's see. Oh, you're welcome. Happy to. All right. Well, we have all notes for the meeting summary, kind of walking through how this works, and I'll send that out on the listserv because I didn't even know about that was there. All right, I'm going to get this screen set up here. Whoop. There we go. So this is information from the March 31st release notes. Please forgive my scrolling. You may have noticed some significant changes to the request manager. And here is a screenshot from the meeting, or excuse me, from the release notes showing exactly what that looks like now. So there have been a lot of changes. We met with Autographics yesterday for our monthly meeting, and my understanding is that they are currently working on changing how this will look, increasing the text size and making the font size more clear. I've shared all of your comments that have been submitted, and thank you to everybody who has reached out on the listserv, one-on-one. Your opinions have been heard, and I really appreciate it. Oh, just one moment, please. If you're in the meeting and you're not
Do you want me to just
muted,
bring it back to you?
oh, just one moment. Cool. I think I've got everything set there. Sorry about that. Yeah, so I just wanted to just in general thank everybody who had submitted their feedback and for bearing with this, because I attended a webinar where they kind of walked through the update, and like I am in this meeting, they were screen sharing Clover, and I was really surprised at how small the text was when I logged in and saw it live for the first time. So Autographics is working on it. They've been receiving a lot of feedback about this from libraries. They have not provided me with like an ETA or a timeline of when we might see any changes. Just being as transparent as possible, but they are planning to work on something because they've received feedback, not just from Vermont, but from other state consortia too. So we're feeling very hopeful and optimistic that we will see some changes in a timely manner. And as soon as I hear any information about how to get folks in there, I'll let you know. And I just saw a message here. Sorry I'm late. I've been trying to join for the last hour. Oh gosh, I'm sorry about that. I've been letting folks in with the admit, so I'm sorry if something glitched out there. Oh, and Marie, thank you. That sounds good. And so if folks have specific questions about anything else in the update, I think by now we've all had some time to like settle in and sense how this update works. something that I have found to be useful is the filtering of requests up here by active. And I'll show you what that looks like live as well from our Clover account. And so yeah, if you're in Clover, we have quite a few active sections in here, but you can go to all, and that will show you everything, including the inactive sections, and they'll be grayed out. And so this gray on gray text I know is really difficult to read, not particularly accessible. And so I have shared all of that feedback with Autographics, and the hope is that we'll see some changes here as soon as possible. And up here on the top right, if you click on active, that'll filter it down. And I think it makes it a little bit more manageable where you can just see the requests that have, or rather the sections that have active requests. And then here's that unreviewed notes that we were looking at before that I'm going to do more of a deep dive into later. I don't think I'll demo that now. I just wanted to show folks how that works. It's going to open this up because we're going to be talking about resupply, or excuse me, will supply and retry a couple topics down. All right. I'm going to head back over to the agenda. So yeah, to make a long story short, thank you all for bearing with the update. Super quirky one, but we'll get through it together. And the hope is that Autographics will be able to, at the very least, make this more easy to read and accessible. But all of your feedback has been shared, and if you have thoughts about how to make the system run better in terms of like enhancements or improvements, please feel free to continue to share those with me, and I'm happy to pass them along. So for now, I'm going to close these two release note windows. And there were a couple of items that were submitted to me via email to read through. One came from Noreen at Essex Library. She asks, are we still putting the date on the courier label of the date it is getting picked up at our library? Is it in the best practices? I was curious. Oh, just letting somebody into the meeting. Hoping it works. Okay, it looks like it did. I was curious to see what folks thought about this. What do you do? Here at the Department of Libraries, we're not labeling our courier our courier label of the date it's getting picked up. I was curious if other libraries are doing that. And when I looked through the best practices, I didn't see it. So I was just kind of wondering, yeah, what other folks do. Rutland does. Okay, good to know. And Tenzin does also. And not in New Haven, Ruth doesn't, Stowe doesn't, and Brownell does. Okay, interesting. Robin writes, I'm doing it because I was told to when training. Not sure what it helps. And Scott writes, I get lots of labels on them with dates on them for what it's worth. Oh, just letting somebody into the meeting. Karen writes, we do in St. Johnsbury. Tammy in Springfield writes that we don't. Karen Chatfield writes that we still do. And Wendy writes, at one point we were having trouble with priority getting things to us in a timely manner. I don't anymore. Niket writes, my understanding is that it was intended to be temporary for tracking priorities promptness. Oh, okay, thank you. I really appreciate the context because there's some things that were happening before I started, and I was just kind of curious why. And Michelle from FML writes that FML does not any longer. Okay, interesting. I'll review our documentation. My understanding is that it's, I think maybe we could leave it up to the individual libraries if they'd like to do that. But as far as best practices, my understanding is that it's not part of the best practices, and because we had just read through them, I don't recall seeing that. But I really appreciate everybody responding and with your experience if you do or not, and Niket for your comment about sort of the rationale for why that was a practice. Ruth writes, it is just me at this library, so I have to streamline things as much as possible, and it didn't seem necessary. Robin writes, I love the idea of not doing it anymore. And Pat writes, we do was trained that way. Yeah, and if you were trained to do so at your library, definitely follow the directions of your supervisor and your team. Petty does mark the dates, happy to stop. So I would say I'm gonna, before I give any guidance, I think I'm just gonna double check the courier service agreement and make sure it's not hidden in there somewhere. Yeah, Petty writes that they do mark the dates, happy to stop, and Rutland writes, if it's still helpful or necessary, we can continue, but if not, we'll stop. Okay. And Margaret writes, we write the courier pickup date on the printed lender's request that we send with all lent books. Interesting. Okay. Cool, cool. All right. So I think for now, I'm I'm not quite sure. I'm just going to do a quick peek 1 second at the service agreement and just make sure that's not in there. 1 quick second. So I just put in the chat what I was reading through and just doing a quick scan. I'll confirm in like the meeting notes, but my understanding is that it's not in the best practices. And so if you were trained at your library by like your team and your supervisors to put the dates on, I would recommend continuing to do so. I think that if you were doing it based on previous department guidance, it's all good to pause, would be my understanding there. And thank you all for your commenting and for your thoughts on that. And I'm just kind of thinking out loud here. I often, like for our purposes, I'll look at the shipped date that we mark the record shipped in Clover, and then think of it, kind of go back to the courier schedule to figure out when it would have gone out. So if that works for you, then I think that works. Cool. Back to stickers and adhesives. This was submitted by Brenda at the Ennisburg Library. And this is just sort of a reminder. I know we talked about this a little bit before, but here we go. Quote, I would like to request that libraries that borrow ILL books, please do not put stickers on other libraries' books. We just received back a book another library borrowed from us. It came back with a printed out sticker from Clover on it. When we were removing it, it didn't come off as easily and left sticker residue on the book. I know this is addressed in the ILL Code of Conduct, and I'm reminding all of this. Thank you. And thank you, Brenda, for submitting it. Yes, that is addressed in the best practices, and we talked about that when we were reading through it over, but I wanted to read over Brenda's comment and reminder just again for everybody. Try to stay away from the stickers and adhesives. Brandon Library reached out to me. I shared this at a previous ILL roundtable maybe a couple of meetings ago, going over the labels for partner libraries. And so just a reminder to everybody to double check that when you're sending items to Brandon Free and Orwell, that you're using the correct partner labels. I have some guidelines or like helpful tips here for, if it's going here, what to do. So for any ILLs going to Brandon or Orwell, if it's going to Brandon, use the Brandon label. If it's going to Orwell, use the partner label. They're all in A to Z on the labels document on our website, and I will pop a link to that in the chat. Right now, there's the link. And so from there, midway through the page is the courier delivery schedule and labels. So the schedule has individual links for like one-page labels. So if you're sending something to Orwell, you can go to that schedule, click on the link, and just get Orwell specific label. I find that to be really easy. You can also use the A to Z label sheet that has everything in one PDF and print out just the label for your library, and that's keyword searchable. So those are two options there. Just a reminder from Brandon and from Orwell, I think that when those are mislabeled, it just adds a little bit of transit time. So thanks all. Okay, now here we are at the will not supply and retry. Many thanks to Wendy for submitting this topic. We had been going over like some troubleshooting of requests and talking with Autographics and working on a support ticket, and it ended up becoming a thing that made sense to talk about here at the roundtable. So what you'll see here is a rather pixelated screenshot that we won't have to look at for too long because I'm going to screen share Clover. But this is an example of what you see when you are responding to a request and you've selected will not supply and that second window pops up. And so what I thought I would do is first I'll go over to Clover and show you what that looks like. And then I'll come here and read through a little bit of some of the information that Autographics shared. So some of these notes are from the support team at Autographics to help us understand what happens when you mark something as will not supply, where does it go, and when you mark something as, excuse me, as retry. So I'm going to switch up my sharing here. And I have a test request in Clover to show you an example of. Close some of my tabs here. Okay. Make this a little bigger. So this is just a test request that I sent myself for the purposes of this exercise. So sometimes you're in Clover and you can't, for whatever reason, you cannot supply a book. So oftentimes the default is just clicking on will not supply and hitting submit. But I wanted to take a little bit of time today to walk through some of the other options. So in addition to will not supply, there's retry, and there's a variety of options that display. So for retry, these are considered non-terminal responses. So the idea being that there is a potential end game where this request will be filled. In retry, you can apply a variety of things, reasons for why the book isn't available, including it's at the bindery, there's a cost involved, it's in use on loan, not found as cited, on hold, other, prepayment required. With retry, it will end up in the requesting library's retry folder if you have selected retry from the status option and any one of these is applied here. It will end up in retry. And so if you would like something to end up in retry, this is the way to go. Will not supply has a variety of options where the request can end up in unfilled or retry. And I'm going to show you some of this information here from the drop-down menu, and then I'm going to walk through as best I can Autographics' explanation of why this works the way it does. With the goal being that you feel empowered when you're working through these status updates and like feeling confident in what you're selecting and knowing where the request is going to go. So there's quite a few choices here. So again, this is selecting will not supply, and then there's the reason condition options. One of the first reasons is no reason. We're omitting the reason. So if you just default, this is the option, and it will go to unfilled. Then there's a couple of options here where it will go to retry. These are those non-terminal responses. So if a book is at the bindery, there's charges, it's in process, it's in use, it will go to the requesting library's retry folder because there's a chance that they could get the book from this lender later or down the line if they resubmitted the request at a later time. However, lacking, the library doesn't hold the book. For example, if the Department of Libraries doesn't have a book and you submit it to us, it would go into unfilled, and then you could request from out of state. If it's lacking copyright compliance, that's a retry option. And so here's a couple of others. Locations not found, if the book is lost, those are considered the terminal responses. It's like the end of that request's route. Some other options here. Some I very rarely use, but non-circulating, maybe a rare book or a special collections item. If the book is not found as cited, so the request has been routed to you and you don't have the book, or you're not able to use the citation in the request records, that will send it to unfilled. And so I won't go through each one of these, but you can see here that there's some options that you can select. There's quite a few. And some of them will send the request to unfilled, and some of them will bop it to retry. And so I would recommend, if you have the time when you're responding to requests, you could, in addition to selecting from the main status option, there's that sub menu of reason condition options, and taking a second to include the reason here can be really helpful. And the request history is down here. And just for example, if I was to respond that the Department of Libraries copy is lost, I'm going to click submit and cross my fingers that this does what I think it's going to do. I submitted this test request with just one lender. So my hope is that coming here into VSS, it will come into unfilled. And there it is. And so I had marked it as lost. And so in theory, when we get down here to the request, you'll see will not supply, notes, reason, or condition lost. And so if you're a library and you're looking for a specific book, maybe there's only like one copy in state or whatever the reason might be, some of these notes and the history information can be really helpful in clearing up why a book wasn't supplied. Maybe you've been trying to submit a book a couple of times and the requests haven't been going through. I definitely recommend checking out the history information. And for libraries that are responding to requests, taking that extra step lets the requesting library have a little bit more information about why the request isn't able to be filled at this time. So I'm going to pause on sharing this window for now. And I'm going to head over to some of the information that Autographics shared. And if questions come up, I just checked on the chat. And it looks like we're doing pretty good. Interrupt me because I know this is a lot and it's a little techy. So will not supply responses, as we just saw, that includes both terminal and non-terminal reasons. So the terminal reasons will have the unfilled in brackets, and the request is going to go to the borrower's unfilled queue if no other lenders on the lender list supply. The non-terminal reasons, or the ones that were marked in the brackets, retry on the reasons sub-status menu there. And when you select those, the request goes to the borrower's retry queue if no other lenders supply. So the request will move through the lender list after you've made your response. And then if no reason is given, it typically behaves like a terminal condition and ends up in filled, which we just saw. When you select will not supply, it defaults to omit the reason and it heads on down to unfilled. That retry status, which was the first one I showed you, when you go to the reasons for responding drop-down menu, there weren't any brackets denoting unfilled or retry. In this section, everything will be going into the retry for the requesting library. So retry contains only non-terminal reasons, like we saw in use, on loan, at the bindery. It's functionally similar to will not supply if you use a non-terminal reason. And that's something that I'd like to highlight here. There is a potential for overlap in where the request will route depending on which option in will supply and which option in retry you choose. There are some options in retry that also will appear and behave similarly if they're terminal under will not supply. So there is some overlap. So I would recommend, if you're responding will not supply and you have the time, selecting the reason in that second menu why. In retry, the request does not re-ask the lender in the same routing cycle. And this is just something that I want to point out with both of these options. If it goes to the end of the lender list, it will be routed to VSS. It won't start the lender list over again. Like if Brooks was the first one at the lender list, and then it gets to the end with Winhall, and then everybody says retry, it won't go back to Brooks again. The lending library would have to resubmit the request by applying a status of approved send, add lender list, what have you. This retry status will signal the borrower that a lender may be able to fill the request later. And that's what I mean when I'm using the AG lingo of terminal versus non-terminal. These are non-terminal because there's a chance that the lender could fill it later on. Requests with a retry response appear in the borrower's retry queue and show an exclamation mark. I'm curious if folks have seen that, because I haven't, and I don't often receive requests in VSS or the state library account that fall into retry. So I just read a lot, and I'm going to check on the chat. Oh, great question from Karen. If we are submitting a blank out-of-state request for items that are unfilled in Clover, is it helpful if we list out-of-state libraries that own copies, or is that not necessary? Thank you for asking, Karen. I would say overall, it's not necessary. There are some books right now that are really tricky to request from out of state, like some of the super popular book club books like Theo of Golden, The Correspondent. There are some of those where when you go into WorldCat, there's like hundreds of libraries, but it can be pretty tricky to find one. So for the most part, I would say you don't have to spend your time doing that. I appreciate the thought, but we check when we go into OCLC from a blank ILL request, we'll check every fee-free or like free lender, no cost first that's available in the United States. And then if there are no copies available from a fee-free lender, we'll reply to the request with conditional and say, there are no free lenders available in OCLC. Would your patron like to pay a fee? If there's a specific library that you want us to request from, please feel free to put that in the notes though, because we'll check all of the libraries that are listed as holding the item. But if for some reason you want a specific copy from a certain institution, definitely put that in a borrower's note and we'll honor that as best we can. So thanks for the question. And Kelly asks a question. Thank you. I have a question. Sometimes when I say will not supply because the delivery request is not supported, it comes back as retry, and I keep getting the same request and have to keep marking it will not supply for the same request. Oh, that's odd. I'd be happy to troubleshoot that, Kelly. If you'd like to email me the request number, I could take a look at that one. It sounds funky. Yeah, I'd be happy to take a look. Thanks, Kelly. And Wendy writes, going back through the lending list, could we put that on the wish list? Yes, we can. I'm going to write that down now. Thank you. Okay, cool. Yeah, thank you all for your feedback and ideas. Any other wish list items? I'm all ears. All right. So I think we left out talking about the exclamation mark. So yeah, here's the routing behavior, which is where the requests travel to in Clover. So if you're choosing retry, it does not move the lender to the end of the current lender queue. So for example, I don't know why I'm thinking about Brooks, but if Brooks was at the beginning of the lender list and they responded in use retry, it would not move them to the end of the lender queue. They would be out of that cycle for that potential book. And then, yeah, the lender is removed from the current routing cycle. They're out. And the borrower must manually resend their request if they want to try those lenders again later. Oh, we got a question. Let's see what's up. When something ends up in retry, do we just approve to resubmit or do we rebuild the lender list? What is the difference? I believe that if you approve to resubmit, it sends it to the same lender list that was on the old request. If you rebuild the lender list, I believe that it will check the holdings in Clover and add items that are currently available to the lender list again. I'm going to confirm that with Autographics, but I'm pretty sure that that is how it works. I'll double check on that. Thank you for the question. And I might run a test with a request too, to see if I can figure that out after the meeting. Thanks all for the questions. And so yeah, here's the automatic rerouting, which is the wish list item that Wendy had mentioned. No automatic second pass through the lender list at this time. And it's intentional to avoid repeatedly sending requests to lenders who already declined. So that's Autographics' rationale for it. I'd be curious if they might be able to enable it to give us a try with it and see, but or like for maybe there might be an option for like individual libraries to opt in, but definitely something to think about. So on the borrower side, when you're seeing a request in your unfilled queue, this means that all lenders affiliated with the record that you selected from, or that the request was routed to based on that record, responded with terminal will not supply reasons. It'll end up in retry if at least one of the lenders gives a non-terminal reason or selects the retry option. So I just want to emphasize here, things may still end up in retry if you respond will not supply, but that second option is non-terminal. And so borrowers must review retry requests and manually decide whether to resend them, which is what we were just talking about with the approved send or rebuild lender list. And so if you would like to change your status options in those drop-down menus, you can do so by visiting ILL admin, configuration, and configure request manager. And that's accessible from the staff dashboard. And these are just some additional notes I had here. If a lender selects retry, they will not be asked again during that request current routing. And they may be asked again only if the borrower resubmits the request from the retry queue. Got a question in the chat. Tenzin asks, will we find this list somewhere, what we are going through now? Oh, absolutely. Yeah, the list that I'm going through now is in the ILL Roundtable agenda document. And that's accessible from the libcal link that I shared earlier in the chat. And I'll put this in the meeting summary too. I'm going to copy all of this into the meeting summary, and I'll share that out on the listserv. Thank you for the question. And I'm hoping I understood the question correctly. And so AG responded to some of the support tickets that I had with some of the information that I put here in quotes. So like the above that I went through was my summary, kind of in my own words, and this is the language coming from Autographics. And so we just went over this above, but if you'd like to read through, on your own some of this technical explanation from Autographics, please feel free. But I did want to read this part here, which is will hopefully answer our question about the rebuilding lender lists. So I'm just going to take a second to review this with everybody. If a request in retry status is updated to approved send, the same lender list will be used, but it will only include lenders that fit the following criteria. So this is great for your question, Wendy. So if you respond based on these responses, if you go this way, then they would fit the criteria and the same lender list would be used. So lenders who responded will not supply with a reason appended with retry. So will not supply with a non-terminal reason. If they responded retry, whether or not a retry reason is included. So regardless of whether they select that second status, did not respond to the request with their participant record setting for days to respond, is configured as a Z target and the location is lendable, but the item is currently not available for ILL, checked out, and uses NCIP and the item is lendable for ILL, but is currently not currently available for ILL, which I don't think this last bullet point would apply to our Clover system. So Wendy, going back to your question about rebuilding the lender list, I'll check more into rebuilding the lender list. My understanding is that when you select that option, it researches all of the holdings in Clover, and as though you were making like a fresh request and searching fresh. But if you have that request that is in retry and you hit approved send, it uses the same lender list, but it will filter out any lenders that don't fit the criteria of these bullet points that I just went through here. And so for more information, there's a user guide in Clover. It's accessible from the staff dashboard. So if you're on the main page, you'll see support, user guides and videos, and this is sort of the file path to get you to exactly where we were. So I'll put this information that's here on the agenda into the meeting summary, but if you would like to do a deep dive into the Clover documentation that Autographics has put together, there's a ton of information available in that section of the staff dashboard. And they also have video tutorials and other helpful things too. I'm going to check in on the chat and see if there were some questions. Well, it looks like I'm caught up there. And I think that is the majority of the things that I had to say about will supply, will not supply, retry, and some of the various settings. Before jumping into just like general Q&A, other questions, I did want to, while I have it top of mind, oh, one moment, I'm just admitting someone into the meeting. Okay. While it's top of mind, VLA is right around the corner, just a couple weeks away. Scott Lovelet has awesomely offered to host a Vermont Interlibrary Loan Forum, an informal get-together for interlibrary loan professionals, included as a brief tour of the Howe ILL office. Oh, my apologies, I didn't include the time here, but there is a link. I think it's in the afternoon. I actually got it on my calendar, so just one second, I can give you the time. 3 p.m.
I think it's 3 to 3:50 is what I have on Monday, June 1st.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Thanks, Scott.
Yeah, just so you know, it's going to be fairly low key. It'll be late in the day. But people who haven't had a chance to take a quick tour of the Howe facilities, we can do a very quick walkthrough. I have to warn you, it's very glamorous here in the ILL office, so I'll try not to overwhelm you too much. But yeah, it'll be a low-key gathering. I think it should be a lot of fun. Looking forward to seeing you all there.
Thanks, Scott. I'm really excited to join you, and that's going to be a blast. So definitely want to give a shout out and many thanks, and looking forward to seeing everybody there.
It does mean I have to clean my office, but other than that, it's all good.
Oh, well, we're excited to check out the space. I've never been to the Howe Library before, so I'm really looking forward to it. And it looks like we have a question here in the chat from Tenzin. Thank you, Tenzin, asking if someone defaults none, meaning without reasons, then it won't go to that library for retry. Is that right? Yes. If you have selected an option of will not supply and there's no reason selected, the default is omit reason unfilled. It will go to unfilled and it won't go to retry at all. I'm hoping that I answered that correctly, and if not, let me know. But I think that's right. Okay, awesome. Thanks, Tenzin. For a second there, I was like, wait, did I have that right? Cool. And so here I just have some like prompts questions, any general questions, anything quirky in addition to the latest autographics updates. What's working well at your institution, any tips, if there's any topics that you're interested in exploring in upcoming meetings, I'm all ears. And as always, I really appreciate when folks submit agenda topics and questions to me via email. And when you come across quirky requests or lender notes that you're confused about or that aren't clear or that you'd like a little bit more information about, please feel free to email myself or anybody at the ILL team, and we'll take a look at it. We're always happy to. I don't want folks to feel like they're in like a murky mystery, wondering why their ILL is misbehaving. Oh, Jenny, you have a hand raised.
Sorry, I have the microphone on and it doesn't want to allow the camera. Okay, anyway, my question is this, and it has to do with when we're returning books and marking them returned. We've had a couple of situations where we have not returned the actual book because it was either lost or damaged, and in one situation, the library told us we didn't need to return the item. And I'm not sure what other libraries do with that. What I've done is mark them as returned and put a note saying that this was lost and replaced or damaged, or just thanking the library for allowing us to keep the item. But I'm not sure that's the proper procedure, because I don't think they find their way to completed. And then on the other side of it, if we're sending something to another library, I feel like I've seen that there's some kind of something that we can choose to say it doesn't need to be returned, and then they don't end up with something that they need to mark as returned. So my questions have to do with those two things.
Thank you, Jenny. I appreciate your questions. Would anyone else like to respond? I do have some thoughts, but I'd just be curious to hear what other folks are doing when they're in that situation. Karen?
We had a situation recently where one of our patrons who had borrowed a book spilled tea all over it. It could not be resurrected. So I contacted the lending library. We discussed whether they would like payment or a replacement. We agreed on replacement, and that once the replacement copy is available, I will send it through the courier, and in Clover, I'll mark the book as returned. And then when they get the replacement copy, they'll mark it as received and complete.
Thanks, Karen. That's exactly what I'd recommend. Do others have experiences they'd like to share? Tenzin writes, that's what I would do also. Yeah, my suggestion there would be if it's something that you're sending back or that you don't have to send back, but the only thing you can do in Clover based on how the request was created is to close it out, I would recommend marking it as returned and including a note saying replacement copy sent or payment sent with like a date or something like that. And then if, maybe a week or two go by and you don't receive a response, maybe emailing the contact information, like the email address that's on the request from the other library, or giving them a call and seeing if they might be willing to close out that record. And then going to the other question that you asked about settings in Clover, yes, if the request is placed with a format selected of non-returnable copy, which I can screen share or provide some notes about in the meeting summary. Maybe meeting notes would be better for this. But anyway, yeah, if you select non-returnable copy, then when you deliver something to the patron, or excuse me, to the requesting library, and you mark it as shipped, they have it, and they can mark it as, I think they can mark it as received, and then it goes to complete. They don't have to return it. They've just received it. So for example, if you request a journal article in Clover, and you're requesting something that's available in state or out of state, you could request that in Clover and mark it as format non-returnable copy. And then when we send you, or the other library sends you a copy of the PDF article, whether they email it to you or attach it to the Clover request, it's non-returnable, so that there's nothing that the receiving library really has to do. And I'm hoping that makes sense. But I would definitely recommend relying on the lender's note in that instance, then following up with the library if enough time has passed and you're feeling like, oh, I'm hoping that everything's all set here. I'd like to see this request closed out.
Just following up, that sounds good to me. And I think some of it maybe I need to follow up on the ones that are still sitting there that I haven't communicated with the library that sent them. And I think that non-returnable copy is a good option for to search for and use. So thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. And if specific questions come up, as you're going through Clover, just feel free to send me an email or give me a call. I'm happy to help. Thank you, Jenny. Yeah. Kelly left a comment here that I'm going to read through. Thank you, Kelly. Appreciate it. I just had a book marked Return to Sender that I returned by mail on the 3rd of March to Russell Memorial Library. This library did not include a return label, so I printed a return label, and it was the wrong address in Clover. I'm hoping we can strongly encourage return labels with every borrowed book and also make sure the addresses are correct in Clover. Thank you, Kelly. I appreciate that comment, and I'll include that information in the meeting summary as well. I think that at the previous in-person ILL roundtable meeting in August, we had a discussion about libraries, like different capacities with their workflows and the amount of staff. And some libraries were sharing that they don't have the bandwidth to include the return labels with every book based on their workflow. And so I think what I might do is have it be like a suggested practice and that's strongly encouraged. And this might be something that maybe we consider for the best practices as well. I'm going to make a note of that. And we can maybe revisit, maybe I can draft up some language that we could revisit at the August meeting. And in the meantime, I would be happy to go into their participant record and update that address. So I appreciate you including that information too. Yeah, that's totally fair. Yeah, Kelly writes, I just feel bad they didn't get the book back. Yeah, I totally get that. Yeah, you just want to, finish the cycle of the book and have it be returned so that the next patron can borrow it. Just reviewing the agenda here. In addition to the VLA conference, we have a couple of other meetings scheduled before the end of the year. There's the August 11th meeting, which will be in person here at the Vermont Department of Libraries. I'll send out like some additional information for that later on in the summer. And then in November, we'll get together on Teams. And then I think I might send out a poll sometime soon in the next coming weeks about like scheduling preferences for these ILL roundtables, like day of the week, and just to get some feedback from folks about time of day that works best for everybody, because we've been switching from 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. And I'm just kind of curious to get some feedback from folks about that. So please stay tuned for a poll from me probably in the next couple of weeks too. And so it's 2:45. I'm just going to check in on the chat here. Yes, thank you, Jennifer, for asking the question. Yeah, the August meeting is in person only. That one's not hybrid. We host that in the Vermont Historical Society's community room, and it's like a really big space with not great acoustics. And so our webcam and like the tech that we have, I don't think would be the best fit for that. So that one would be in person. And then in the meantime, looking forward to VLA in just a couple of weeks too for the ILO get together. Just gonna check in on chat here and see if there's any other questions. Alrighty, well, I really appreciate all of the agenda items that people submitted. Oh, Tenzin writes, how long would be the in-person meeting? I think that last year between the meeting and we had like a little bit of an informal tour. It was maybe about 2 hours, and then some folks stayed for lunch afterwards too. We ordered takeout from Aranda's, like a local Mexican place. So we might do that again. So it can be flexible. And if you can only make part of it, that's all good too. There's no obligation to stay for the whole thing. Thank you. Thanks for that question, Tenzin. So yeah, in between now and the August meeting, I'm gonna work first this week on getting a meeting summary together, and I'll have this recording posted. I'll share that out on the ILL roundtable. I'll also include a copy of the agenda and the 2 copies of the share it release notes that we reviewed today, so that everything, all the documents are like in one place for everybody. I'll also review the discussion that we had about the ILL best practices, and I think I'll have a couple of draft language texts, and I'll have like a slide together like we did at the August roundtable in person last year. I had a couple of draft text sections that we read through on like a PowerPoint, and then we approved them as a group. I think if that sounds good to everybody, I'll set up something similar for this August based on the conversations that we had today. And for folks who ask specific questions, I appreciate them, and I'll follow up with folks one-on-one in the next couple of weeks. And yeah, I think that's everything. I really appreciate everybody's time today, and thanks so much for submitting, agenda items and great discussion points. This roundtable is often like a packed agenda and fruitful conversation, and a huge part of that is in thanks to all of you and everything that you contribute to it to make it so great. So thanks all for the conversation and for your support of resource sharing. As always, the department is here to help you in any way. If you have questions, please feel free to reach out to anybody at the department. We'll point you in the right direction. And the Department of Libraries has a bunch of roundtables. So if you're interested in exploring more, check out the continuing education page on our website, and you can learn more about them there. I hope everybody has a great rest of your afternoon. It's sunny here in Barre. I hope it's sunny where you are, and I'll see hopefully lots of you at VLA. Take care, everybody, and thanks again.
Kara?
Hi.
Hi. Sorry, I was late today.
Oh, that's all good. I just